You're watching Public Affairs. Berkowitz is my name and politics is our game. And we will be doing lots of politics and public policy today, this evening, because we have State Representative Julie Hamos, who just comes off a very close Democratic primary in the 10th Congressional District race. She lost that race by 1,000 votes or so to Dan Seals. And so we're going to find out a little bit about that, about how that race went and what she thinks. We might even find out her name is being mentioned, along with many others, to be the Lieutenant Governor nominee for the Democratic Party to join the ticket with Governor Pat Quinn. Find out a little bit about that. But most importantly, this is her 12th year. Julie Hamos is in her 12th year in the state legislature. She knows a lot about budget, deficits, spending, taxes, and other things. So we'll be talking about all of those things. What is the state of the budget deficit? Is it really, as some people say, $13 billion? Is the operating deficit $5 billion? What does it matter? I think you're all going to, if you're watching this downstate, upstate, west, east, even outside of Illinois, stay tuned, because we're talking about matters of national prominence. And even if you're outside of Illinois, these things are very similar in very many states. So Julie Hamos, get back to more about our guest as we go into the show. But how could you have won the 10th Congressional District primary? What could you have done differently to get those additional 1,000 votes?
Well, it was a big uphill battle because Dan Seals was well known throughout the district and I was not. He's run twice before. He has spent millions of dollars in publicizing his name. So maybe it was just maybe it was impossible. I don't know. But I think a few more weeks, longer primary. We used to have a mid-March primary date. Some people think that we had a lot of momentum after the new year, and maybe a few more weeks would have gotten me over the edge, but I don't know.
So the name recognition was big because Dan had run in 2006, run in 2008, both won those primaries and then ran and lost close races in the general election. Your point is you kind of started that on this show. When was it? Last July? Is that kind of when you announced?
End of July.
And
Dan Seals did a poll right at the beginning, and he showed that I was only at 8%. That was daunting. Yeah. Now, the other thing is that there was a third person in the race. Elliot Richardson got 5% of the vote. I lost by 2%. Do the math.
You mean the people who were voting against Dan for one reason or another, they would have gone to you, but for Elliot?
Maybe.
Was Elliot a plant? Do you think Dan put him in?
No, but I think Elliot helped to elect Dan.
Yeah, but I think he thought he really could win.
I think so too.
I talked to him, you talked to him.
Yeah,
he sounded
got 5%.
Genuine, sincere.
Yeah, and I think he's a young man who has a lot of promise in politics, and I wish he had started at a different level, someplace working his way up, showing that he can do some stuff.
You're going to become a part of the Dan Seals campaign as he runs against Congressman Mark, as he runs to replace Congressman Mark Kirk.
That's right, Bob
against
Dole.
Bob Dole, the Republican.
Sure, I'm going to help him if I can, yeah.
You think?
We need to come together as a Democratic family, and I made that point even on election night. This is a Democratic primary. People can run in a Democratic primary, but the next day we're all about coming together and really trying to elect Democrats.
And
especially right now, when it's so important for our President Barack Obama to have more Democrats who are in line with his thinking and his values.
Yeah, going right over to healthcare, we talked about it last July or so. We're talking about it still.
I talked about it every day for 6 months. I got excited about healthcare.
Yeah, you think that, what do you say to the folks who say the national polls show that the Obamacare plan is not favored by the majority of the people? The majority of people oppose that.
I think a majority of the people don't know what's in the Obamacare, as you call it, because it's been confusing. I think the White House, if anything, has not done as well in communicating. And it's a complicated plan. So we don't know the 5 key points in this national health care plan. But I believe that at the end of the day, it will pass, and they will break it down for us. And I think the public will see how important this is to move forward on health care reform.
And will they break the tradition of the Senate and not allow a filibuster, that is, put that vote up under reconciliation, which only requires a majority, which is, as you know, that's not what reconciliation is used for. It's used for budget matters, not for a major change in public policy.
Well, that's true, but you know
what?
Will
the Democrats do that? Will they go with that and try to break the filibuster that way?
I think the Democrats are going to try to pass health care, and whatever it takes is what's going to be considered. But I do want to point out that during my campaign for Congress, we talked about the use of reconciliation. I thought it was much more limited. But as I've had a chance to really review that, a lot of healthcare reforms have come about by using reconciliation. In fact, one of the most important laws on the books is something called COBRA, Many people use COBRA after they leave a job. They buy into their employer's health care plan. COBRA, the words B and R, the letters B and R stand for Budget Reconciliation, Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act. That's how that came about. A lot of healthcare, the children's health insurance plan happened through budget reconciliation. The Bush tax cuts, the Republicans did that through the use of reconciliation. So actually it's been used quite a bit, and it's not as radical as many of us would think, and I think it's majority rule. Majority should rule in Congress. I think that there's too much power right now vested in individual United States senators. I think the rules of the Senate should change at some point. Individual United States senators can hold up an entire agenda. So I think reconciliation is probably being considered right now. But I do think in the next few months, we are going to see national health care reform, and I think we have to then go out and sell it to the public.
And when Barack Obama was first in the U.S. Senate in 2005, and you remember the Republicans were trying to push through various judicial nominees in the Senate, and they were being held up by the filibuster.
Yeah.
What did Barack Obama say then? He said, our founding fathers believe there's a difference between the Senate and the House.
Yeah, well.
There's a reason for the filibuster. And so he defended the filibuster then. He defended something that was not completely decided on majority rule. And now he's flipped. Right?
Well, I think it's being
It's a flip-flop.
overused. It's being overused. It's being used in the United States Senate for every single thing. And
Filibuster
the
is
threat
being
of
overused.
filibuster, the threat of filibuster, and requiring a 60% rule in the United States Senate for every single thing that happens there. And you know, I think the Democrats will feel like they need to move ahead and get some things done, and they're going to do what they can with simple majority.
Okay, so let's go over the state issues. Go over to the lieutenant governor process in the Democratic Party. First, we start with Scott Lee Cohen being elected. I mean, who is Scott? Why was he elected? Did that make any sense?
Well, yes. He spent $2 million getting his name publicized in a field where not a single person, I bet, could name for you the 6 people running on the Democratic side and the 6 people running on the Republican side. And the 2 people who got nominated, both Scott Lee Cohen and this guy,
Jason Plummer.
Plummer, were the wealthiest. And they both had an opportunity to put their name forward in a statewide race, which is very expensive. So the rich prevailed on that one.
Well, but quite different.
Because nobody knew anybody.
Jason Plummer's 27 years old. You know, he has experience commensurate with a 27-year-old. He's worked in the family business. Well, it's less than somebody who's 45, to be fair.
He spent a lot of his own money to put his name forward. That's how he won.
He was an intern for Senator Peter Fitzgerald, right?
I think
he was
he's
an intern
overinflating his resume at the moment.
He was an intern at both those
He's
places.
overinflating his resume. He's not ready to lead government if, God forbid, a Republican would win and he would have to take over.
We're going to have
He's not ready.
The voters are going to decide that.
That's not the question. The question is, how did they prevail?
You can't compare.
That's true.
Scott
And
Lee
I didn't
Cohen
mean to. No, I didn't mean to. What you asked is, how did they get elected? And I'm telling you, the reason they got elected is they spent the most money. It's unfortunate that money plays that kind of role in politics. But they spent money.
So it's the $2 million that does it, certainly in the case of Scott Lee Cohen.
Totally. Nobody knew anything about him. Now, I do blame the
Why didn't somebody vet him? I mean, why didn't his opponents find out any of these things and bring it out?
I think the other lieutenant governor candidates had an obligation to tell us about Scott Lee Cohen.
One of your colleagues, State Rep Art Turner, he should have done that.
I think so.
Another colleague, Senator Ricky Hendon, he should have done that.
Yes.
Another colleague, Representative Mike Boland, right?
Right.
All 3 state
Senator
legislators.
Terry Link.
Another colleague, Senator Terry Link. Who am I leaving out? I think there's one individual. Well, one other name.
I think they should have told us more about him. They were the ones who had the most at stake. They learned the most about him. We didn't know anything about Scott Lee Cohen. He just spent a lot of money.
So did the media drop the ball too?
Yes.
Partly as a condensed campaign, not enough time to go through this.
Yes.
Partly
lieutenant governor is not that important of a position.
Well, it is now because of the pace that it could. We've seen a case recently where the lieutenant governor became governor.
That's right.
Pat Quinn, right?
Sure.
So now it's viewed as more important. We hadn't had that happen too recently. Could happen again.
Absolutely.
Then it becomes, you're right, the responsibilities may not be great, certainly not by the Constitution, for the lieutenant governor, unless the lieutenant governor has to replace the governor.
Well, and you know, there's a move afoot to put a constitutional amendment on the ballot that would eliminate the position 4 years from now.
There is. Do you think that's a good idea?
I don't, but I think it's going to pass.
Really? Because
I'm against it.
And what would happen if instead of the lieutenant governor, if we don't have a lieutenant governor, it would go to the next in line of succession would be the attorney general.
Right.
which is fine perhaps if the people, as Attorney General, if it's the same party as the governor.
Right.
Do we want to have a situation where they elect, say, a Republican and the Attorney General's Democrat, or vice versa?
This is why I'm against it.
Okay.
I think it does inhibit everything to have them in different parties. In fact, I wonder whether if, let's say, Joe Burkett, who was running for Attorney General, if he had won last time, would we have moved forward to impeach Rod Blagojevich if it meant giving the reins
Probably
of government over to
not, right?
Burkett? That's what I worry about. So politics becomes too important of a factor if you have that kind of line of succession. So I'm for maintaining the lieutenant governor role, but I think right now it's a constitutional amendment being proposed by Speaker Madigan. It might, in fact, get the votes in the General Assembly, and the public may vote that in this fall.
Okay. We should say we're taping this show on February 28th, so some of the things we're talking about may be resolved or close to being resolved, because many people will see this in the week of March 8th. The State Central Committee and the Democratic Party, people who've been elected to those positions, that'll be certified on March 5th. So people speculate that the State Central Committee will meet sometime probably between March 5th, March 15th, and decide. They're the people who decide, those 19, I guess it's 38, 2 for each congressional district, 38 State Central Committee members, and of course the chair of the Illinois Democratic Party, Mike Madigan, will have something to say about it. I think he has a vote, but in a sense he has more than a vote, because a lot of the folks in the State Central Committee, you would know, be very influenced by what Mike Madigan wants, right?
And I think that Pat Quinn has a serious vote.
They'll be influenced by what? Because Quinn has things to help to have people decide, as does Senate President John Cullerton.
Yes,
those three will have influence.
Those three have influence, but I have to say that Pat Quinn, Governor Quinn, should be looking at who will help him get elected. So who's the best addition to the team, and also who will help him govern for the next 4 years. We have many serious issues facing us at the state level, and this person, Lieutenant Governor, should be given some responsibilities, a portfolio, something to work on. And the Governor Quinn has many issues out there. He could assign something to that Lieutenant Governor, and should.
So you're ideal. I mean, you've got the time now, because you're finishing your 12th year.
Yes.
You're old enough to run for Congress. Julie Hamos, you've shown you can be popular in the suburbs with a large number of people who didn't know you until recently. They knew you from your district, your legislative district. So what would you say if Pat Quinn and the State Central Committee and Mike Madigan and President Cullerton were to give you a call and say, I don't know if we can, you're our candidate. I was going to say you're a girl, but we wouldn't say that.
You know what?
Because Hillary said, she wanted people to say you're a girl, but I guess but you're a candidate. I guess they could say that, right?
I would be thrilled. I mean,
and you would accept it in a heartbeat?
Absolutely. I would be happy to do that. I would work very, very hard to get right out there and help Governor Quinn get elected. I would help him govern the same things I just put forward. I don't think it's going to happen. I'm not counting on it.
Because you're not downstate? Do you think that's a crucial factor?
I don't know.
People are saying, one thing the Republicans have on their slate now of 6 statewide candidates, 3 downstaters. And as currently is the case, there are none for the Democrats. Right.
And I think the balance of this will be the suburbs. And the north suburbs are very important to this whole effort, and that's why I think I would be a good candidate. But I guess we'll call him Chairman Madigan of the state party, put forward some rules on Friday. As we're taping this today, a few days ago, he said, we're going to have a process, and anybody who would like to present their credentials will be welcome to do that with the state party. I will not be doing that.
Oh, part of the process is the credentials need
I will not be going forward and presenting my credentials. They know where I am. They know how to find me.
You don't think they could still decide and call you even if you don't present your credentials?
I hope they will.
Okay,
I'd be happy
so it still
to
might
do
happen?
That. I'd be happy to do that, but it's not going to happen, Jeff.
Why?
I just don't think it will.
You don't want to give me any reasons?
I don't know the reasons. I'm not counting on it.
As far as Claypool, his name has been thrown around
There's
there.
many names.
But do you think Claypool would be a good selection?
I think, as we talked before, he's popular in the suburbs, and I think he'd be a strong candidate, yes.
Representative Bradley from downstate Marion?
Well, I think the downstate guys, as I think of them, are pretty conservative for us, and I don't think the state right now, the northern part of the state, there's really a big chasm.
You mean he's pro-life and you couldn't accept a pro-lifer?
I think on the issue of choice, on the issue of gay rights and marriage, on the issue of gun control, there's big differences between downstate and upstate, and right now I don't think we really want a very conservative downstater on this ballot. Now, If they select, in their infinite wisdom, the state party selects that person, I will be for them all the way, because I'm going to be a big champion for the Democratic ticket. I think there's a big difference between Governor Quinn and whoever the Republicans give us. And I think we don't know that yet as we're taping this show today. And I think there's a big difference between Democrats and Republicans in the state of Illinois. So I'm going to be for the Democrats.
And people pretty much vote on the governor more than the lieutenant governor.
That's right.
I mean, the lieutenant governor could help.
I think it's very important to elect Governor Quinn.
Okay. One thing.
Re-elect.
State Rep Art Turner came in second. He's African American.
Right.
People would say in an Olympic contest, if the first medal person doesn't get it for some reason, in this case he wasn't. We should say, I think we've said before that people may say that Scott Lee Cohen was disqualified. He wasn't disqualified. He met the qualifications. There was pressure on him to step down, apparently, and he did. But in that case, when the number one for some reason steps down, doesn't the medal goes to the person who got number two? Should it go to Art Turner?
You know what? We're spending a lot of time talking about Lieutenant Governor, and I'm for whoever they decide, because I think it doesn't matter that much. I hope they'll find somebody who's strong and who will help Governor Quinn get elected.
All right, so let's go over to the state, what do we call it, the state budget mess?
Oh my God.
Is there any other way to describe it? It's a mess,
There's no other way to describe it. It's a mess.
Now, some people say it's a $13 billion deficit.
Right.
But Senator Radogno, the Republican leader, said recently, a few days ago, we're taping this on the 28th, she said, well, it's a $5 billion operating deficit. Mm-hmm. Is that a distinction worth making, the difference? And do you agree with her? $5 billion operating
deficit. $6 billion
deficit.
of overdue bills.
So, yeah, it's a cumulative effect of money in the past. A kind of carryover from prior deficits, would you say? Right?
Yes.
You agree with her?
I think that's true, because I think, in fact, the revenues are coming back. Okay. So the income tax, the sales tax, the revenues that come into the state, we're seeing a slight surplus next year over last year, thank God. But it's a big problem. $6 billion of unpaid bills at the end of June, or at the end of June. That's terrible. All of the providers we know, all the vendors we know are waiting for their bills to be paid. That's a terrible way to deal with them.
Okay, now the Democrats, a variety of Democrats have put forth a variety of tax increase proposals. You voted for one, right?
Yes.
A $4 billion increase, a $4 billion increase.
And it's only $4 billion, and I should point that out.
Some had $6 billion.
It's $4 billion. No, well.
The Senate one was more, wasn't it?
5, because they had some exemptions
3 to
and that
5%,
kind of thing.
didn't they?
They went from 3% to 5%. Yeah. I voted for a temporary 2-year income tax going from 3% to 4.5%. I did vote for that because I thought it was that important to pay our bills and put the state into better condition moving forward. We didn't get it done, though, and now we have $6 billion of overdue bills. That's really a tragedy.
Was there a corporate income tax increase in that proposal
yes,
as well?
Oh, sure.
Do you think that tends to push either corporations who are businesses that are in Illinois, push them out of Illinois if you raise taxes?
I think the Civic Federation just came out with a report. As we're taping this today, it was just really a week ago, I think. They're a major downtown, nonpartisan, business-oriented group that said we need to raise our taxes. And they're willing to raise income tax for personal income tax as well as corporate income tax. They said it's that important for the state of Illinois to right the ship, basically. They also said we need reform. And I'm for that too. They talked about pension reform, and they talked about the importance of really tackling these long-term debts and obligations of the state. That's the way I think we should tackle it, as a big package. Now, will we do that before the election? We didn't last year. That was a year and a half before the election. That's when we should have done it, and it didn't get done. And I'm sorry about that.
Is it because Speaker Mike Madigan and now I think President Cullerton joined? I think they joined together in saying the Democrats are not going to push for a tax increase by themselves. They want essentially shared blame. They want Republicans to sign on to this. If not, they're not going to do it this year.
I agree.
Did I get that right? Is that what they're saying?
Well, I agree that this demands a bipartisan solution. This demands bipartisan problem solving. However, my speaker would have had to talk to the other side to get that done. You have to reach across the aisle. You have to extend the olive branch. That didn't happen.
To Tom Cross, is that what you're
talking about? To Tom Cross. So when they're fighting and sparring like school children on the playground, then what's the possibility of even doing a bipartisan approach? At least what we see at the federal level is that when President Obama sits down at the same table and invites everybody around the table, at least it's a good faith effort. We don't have that in Springfield right now. Not even the effort of trying to reach across the aisle.
Did President Cullerton, did he reach out to
Yes, he does.
Senate
Yes, he does.
Republican leader Radonio?
Yes, he does. We see more of that now on the Senate side than we do on the House side.
Is it because there's friction in particular with Madigan and Cross, or is it just Madigan's style not to do that?
I don't know. I think for sure there's friction. We know that. And it goes back a few years. But I think it's time to get beyond that because the problems of the state are that important.
The reform, Dan Proft talked about this. He said it should be big ticket reform. Candidate, as people would remember in the Republican primary, Dan Proft was running for governor there. He said the 4 big ticket items are healthcare, education, pensions, and transportation.
Sure.
You would agree with Dan on that,
well, those are the 4 big ticket items.
4, okay.
It's not that hard to figure that out.
And should they all be reformed, as Dan Proft suggested?
I'm sure we could figure out a way to reform all of those, sure.
He says it must be done. Is it a necessity to deal with the deficit?
But where I really disagree with Dan Proft, and I disagreed with him the last time I came on your show 6 months ago.
We're going to have to put you together because you disagree with him so
well,
much.
I disagree with him, essentially disagree with him on the fact that we can deal with a $12 billion, or call it what you want, $12 billion deficit just by reforming those 4 things with no new revenues. That's where I really disagree with him.
Well, he also says he would sell some assets that he doesn't think the state...
Oh, great. That's always a big...
He says the state, these are not core functions of the state anyway.
And when we tried to sell Thompson Prison, who are the people who are fighting that right now?
Number one, you're not going to get much money from that. And a prison, I have to ask Dan, but Dan would say a prison is a part of the core function of the state, and that prison is probably, for political reasons, not being used.
It is, it's for budget reasons not being used.
It's a more efficient new prison, and we're keeping other prisons open that are older because the political groups in that area don't want to lose prisoners to Thompson.
We've never been able to afford opening up Thompson Prison.
Nevertheless, prisons are a core function.
I think we should reform those 4 systems, of course.
Okay.
Now,
let me start with
I feel like I
pensions.
did that. I feel like I did that with transportation, by the way.
Well, we'll come back to transportation. But let's pensions. That's an easy one, right? Because everybody
there
says
are solutions on the table.
2-tier pension.
Yes.
Different benefit, fewer benefits for state employees, for new state employees, for new teachers,
and really even police and fire and municipal workers,
government employees in general,
yes.
for public employees. Those would all of the new employees would get lesser benefits on pensions under a 2-tier pension plan.
30 years from now. So 30 years from now, when they retire,
nobody kicks in now because you can start putting in less money next year and the next year and the next year.
These are new employees hired today. When they retire 30 years from now, 30 years, they would have to work longer. They wouldn't be able to retire quite at a young age because people are living longer.
To get egregious examples, you can find these where some person taught maybe 20, 25 years. They put in maybe $60,000 or $70,000, nothing for health care. They walk out with a pension over $1 million or $2 million because they live to be 85. They start collecting when they're 50. It could be $100,000 a year.
People are living too long.
Oh, my point is they're putting in very little. They're getting a lot. You would sign on to that. Reform, restructure those public policy union pensions.
Let me just say this. I've been running for United States Congress. The big issues for United States members of Congress is to do the same thing there. Social Security, long term, that's all of us. Those aren't just government employees. We're living too long. The systems can't afford to pay for us for so long. We're going to have to reform that as well.
Just answer that question.
Pensions, publicly funded pensions generally, will have to be reformed from local government to federal government.
And would you sign on specifically to, as the private sector has defined, contribution pensions as opposed to defined benefits? Would you say yes or no to that?
No.
Well, that's a major problem because those are
the
private sector has done that and they've saved money.
The stock market just crashed a year ago, so this is not exactly a great time to be pushing a defined contribution plan.
Well, it is over the long haul. We got to go on.
When people's pensions would depend on the stock market, I don't think we're quite ready to look at all that.
Okay. Education. Last 25 years, real growth in education, 6% a year. Spending has just been growing enormously. ACT scores are relatively flat. We have to spend less on education. Don't you agree?
Well, less on education.
Yeah. If you've been raising spending dramatically as we have with education,
Jeff,
isn't that when you start to lower the rate of growth?
We have not been looking at spending less on education. We have been looking at demanding more. We've been looking at more accountability. We've been looking at more performance. We've been looking at more help for non-functioning schools, non-performing schools. So there's more to do with education, yes. I have supported, not vouchers, but I have supported charter schools, laboratories of innovation. There's more to do with education. We haven't been really talking about spending less. In fact, the No Child Left Behind law, given to us by the federal government under Bush, didn't put enough supports in for these schools and for these teachers to be able to help the children who were not really performing.
Two-thirds, you would
It
agree.
costs money to do that.
Two-thirds of state spending goes to education or healthcare, right? Two-thirds, roughly. Am I right on that statistic?
Well, maybe,
Yeah.
sure.
Okay, so if you're going to cut the rate of growth of spending anywhere, if you're going to deal with this deficit, and even you say raise taxes by $4 billion, and you say I got a deficit of $13 billion, you got to do more than raise taxes.
Right.
So you got to go where the spending is. The spending is on healthcare and
But it's
education.
very hard to talk about reducing costs, the funding for education, because let me say one other thing about education. In Illinois, it's an anomaly. The state doesn't contribute toward education in Illinois. We're almost dead last in the country.
It does.
The local
it does to
property
the tune
taxpayers are paying for
$10
education
billion.
in Illinois.
The general revenue budget is about currently slipped to about $27 billion, but I think $10 billion or more goes to education, doesn't it?
Well,
It may be a small percentage of total spending on education, but a lot more comes from
I'm
the local
just saying,
government.
I have talked about reforming education programs, education systems, but not reducing the money that we spend toward it. There's so many needs that children have, so much that we need to be providing. And I think if we contribute toward education at the state level, it's less demand on local property taxpayers.
I got to interrupt just to say we're going to continue to speak as the
I'm so
credits
sorry
roll.
we're done. Let me just say one quick thing.
Can I just
I
say
want to
one-
thank all the people
Okay.
in the 10th District who were kind to me, who supported me, who walked precincts for me, who taught me, who came to my many, many events. And I learned so much, and it was a wonderful experience.
All right, and I want to thank State Rep Julie Hamos for coming here, talking about her congressional race, talking about Lieutenant Governor, the process, and talking about state spending and deficits. And you've shown a lot of reasons why we're going to make having you back lots of times.
Thank you.
Whether you're a state rep or not. You understand that, right?
Okay, thank
That's your obligation.
I'll come.
All right. Okay, so we've talked about education, we've talked about pensions, healthcare. We've got to get that under control.
I agree.
I mean, and that's gone up rapidly, 8% a year,
I agree.
right?
I think we need to, again, and that's part of the national health care plan. I think we should do it at the state level,
Managed
too.
care. You're for managed care?
We're in fact trying a managed care Medicaid program right now in Illinois.
Okay, and that's one way, but we have too many people
And I
on
called,
the
by
we
the
have
way-
too many people on the Medicaid rolls. Do we have to be
I
less
think we
expensive?
need to look at that. I think we need
you
to
would
look
agree
at that.
We got to get those costs under control.
I think so.
And last is transportation. How do we reform transportation to get costs down?
I feel like
You-
I did that for transit. We
Did
really
you
did.
get costs down?
Well,
Did you get spending down?
I think no. I mean, that's not
So
the
we gotta
way to
look
think
more-
about it. We're wanting to increase ridership, to tell you the truth. And with every new rider, it demands a public subsidy. Sad to say,
So
but
you
it's
tell
true.
me, with these big deficits, where do you look to make major inroads to cut spending? Where do you look?
Well, I think we talked about some of that, and I think that the
Education,
budget.
healthcare.
I think that the governor is going to come in with some proposals. He needs to, because he has a big budget to present, and I can't even imagine how he's going to come to us with a balanced budget in the middle of this very tough climate.
We'll find that out on March 10th,
Yeah.
right? So as people are watching
Yep.
here, you'll be able to see Governor Pat Quinn give his budget address. You will be down there in Springfield.
I will.
You will be smiling as he comes in and as he delivers
Yeah, I'll be
that
applauding
speech.
and hoping that he's going to show the way. It's going to
And
be a very tough budget
He's
year.
going to come back and ask for a tax increase?
I think he is.
And you think
With
that's
reforms.
wise? And you think that's wise
I
right
think
now,
we
even with the
need
economy
new revenues. We
staggering?
cannot cut our way out of this big budget deficit. It cannot happen.